Hi, my name is Jessica, and I wanted to welcome you to church today. It's so great to have you worship with us, even though we can't be together in a physical church building. This week I've been connecting with my friends on Zoom for Bible study on Monday nights, and that has made all the world of difference for me. I'm an extroverted person, and I love to be able to connect with people, and so it's been hard to be apart from everybody. But I can tell you that being able to connect on Monday nights with my friends has been great. So I would really encourage you this week to do that. Get a group of friends together on Zoom and grab a cup of coffee, or maybe you can do it on FaceTime too. But instead of meeting with just one or two people, maybe get a group together like you would in person. It makes all the world of difference. Thanks for joining us today. Let's worship together.
Well, good morning and thanks for joining with us. We're glad that you're here. Every praise is to our God. Every word of worship in one accord. Every praise is to our God. Sing hallelujah to our God. Sing glory, hallelujah to our God. Every praise is to our God. Every praise is to our God. Every word of worship in one accord. Every praise is to our God. Sing hallelujah to our God. Sing glory, hallelujah is to our God. Every praise is to our God. God my Savior, God my healer, God my deliverer, oh yes He is, yes He is. God my Savior, God my healer, God my deliverer, oh yes He is, yes He is, and oh yes He is. Yes, He is. Yes, He is. Every praise is to our God. Every word of worship with one accord. Every praise is to our God. Sing hallelujah to our God. Sing glory, hallelujah. It's to our God. Every praise is to our God. God my Savior, God my healer, God my deliverer, oh yes He is, yes He is. God my Savior, God my healer, God my deliverer, oh yes He is, yes He is, yes He is, yes He is, yes He is. Oh, this is the day that you have made. Whatever comes, I won't complain. For all my hope is in your name, and now your joy awaits my praise. I give thanks for all you have done, and I will sing of your mercy and your love. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. I was down, you brought me out. You set my feet on higher ground. So here I stand, you are my God. His faithfulness, my solid rock. I give thanks for all you have done. I will sing of your mercy and your love. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. I give thanks for all declare the love our God has spoken over us. And as we lift our hands up, the heavens open, the heavens open. So let our lives declare the love our God has spoken over us. I give thanks for all you have done. I will sing of your mercy and your love. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. I give thanks for all you have done. I won't forget all the battles you have won. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. One day you'll make everything new, Jesus. One day you will bind every wound. The former things shall all pass away. No more tears. One day we'll make sense of it all. Jesus, one day every question resolved, and every anxious thought left behind. No more fear. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing it will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout victory. One day we will see face to face Jesus. Is there a greater vision of grace? And in a moment we shall be changed. On that day, one day we'll be free, free indeed, Jesus. One day every struggle will cease, and we will see your glory revealed on that day. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing it will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout victory. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing it will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout victory. One day we will see face to face Jesus. Is there a greater vision of grace? in a moment we shall be changed. In a moment we shall be changed. In a moment we shall be changed on that day. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing it will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout victory.
Thanks for joining us this morning. In a few moments, we're going to look at Mark chapter 4, starting at verse 35. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about storms. Over the years, I've come to appreciate the value of watching a good storm. There's just something about a storm that is so enjoyable. The wind, when it's blowing, and its power and its might is absolutely astounding to me. And I know you can't see the wind, but you can see its effects everywhere. When there's thunder and lightning, I'm mesmerized by the incredible power of the storm. It's in those moments where I'm reminded of my insignificance compared to what's going on around me. If you're watching this morning on Facebook or YouTube, maybe you would just take some time to comment and let us know. If you like to watch a storm, just say, I love to watch storms and this is why. Or maybe you don't like storms, and maybe you just share that in the comment as well, just to kind of give us an idea whether you like storms or don't like to watch storms. But wherever you find yourself on the spectrum, one of the things that I'm always aware of is I love to watch storms when I'm in relative safety. You see, it's one thing to watch a storm when you're inside and you're not exposed to the elements. You're in a place where you're protected. It's one thing to watch and be safe, and it's another thing to be right in the middle of the storm. This morning we are going to look at a physical storm, a storm that was a pretty fierce storm. But what I hope that we're going to focus on, although we're going to talk about how difficult and how fierce the storm was, I hope that our focus when we're looking at this today is not just on the size of the storm. I hope and pray that throughout this morning, your focus will be on the size of your God who is with you. It will be on who is Lord of the storm and who is with you in the middle of the storm. The present storm that is going on in the world around us, brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, is absolutely astounding. Never before in most of our lifetimes have we seen something like this. The whole world has been put on pause because of this pandemic. Nations have come to a grinding halt. People have been told to stay inside, and we here in Canada are walking through the very same thing, but it's taking place all over the world right now. It is definitely a worldwide storm. And as we're there and we're thinking about the hardships that are coming from this storm, millions, in fact, maybe billions of people will be impacted negatively. Their finances will be strained. People are losing loved ones at this time, and it's absolutely sad. Healthcare workers and essential workers are daily going to do their job, and as they go to do their job, they're afraid that they might be infected, and then they would go home and take it to their loved ones. There is so much that is going on in the world around us today. It's possible that this crisis that's in our world today has caused you to make some decisions you never ever thought that you were going to have to make. It's possible that you had to make some decisions more quickly than you would have liked to have made, and you wish you had more time, or you wish you had more information before you had to make those decisions. There's so much that is racing through your mind because of what is going on around you. You see, storms have this incredible way of exposing underlying issues. They have this way of kind of causing us to come face to face with some of our deepest fears and our deepest challenges. This morning we're going to look at Mark chapter 4, starting at verse 35. It says these words, "As evening came, Jesus said to the disciples, 'Let's cross to the other side of the lake.' So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving crowds behind, although other boats did follow. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Verse 38 says, Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up, shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." Some versions say, "Quiet, be still." Suddenly the wind stopped and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" The disciples were absolutely terrified. "Who is this man?" they asked each other. "Even the wind and the waves obey him." Well, before we go any further, let's talk a little bit about some background information at that time. From what I understand, they would have been on the Sea of Galilee, and the Sea of Galilee would have been very familiar to Jesus and the disciples at that time. The Sea of Galilee is about 650 feet below sea level. And on the outside of the Sea of Galilee, and I've never been there, but this is just my understanding from looking at different things, there's some hills around it. And the wind at times will come over those hills, and it'll come down in that spot, and it'll just begin to kind of whip up the waves. And all of a sudden, fierce storms will begin to take place, and the waves will just begin to buffet anything that's out there on the lake. And so that would have been kind of where the disciples and Jesus would have found themselves in that moment. It is also important that you understand the disciples were professionals. They were professional fishermen. They did this for a living. They weren't in a body of water that they were not familiar with. In fact, it was their home lake, so to speak. It was where they were used to fishing. So they knew that this type of thing happened and took place on the Sea of Galilee. But there was something different about this storm. There was something about this storm that, as we read a few moments ago, really scared them in these moments. This was not their first moment on a boat, and so they were scared because of the fierce nature of the storm. And that's the first thing we're going to look at today. This was not just any storm. This was a fierce storm. It wasn't just any storm. It was a fierce storm. There were high waves, and the waves were so bad that they began to break into the boat, and they began to be afraid of what was taking place. Now, again, I'm no sailor. I'm no fisherman, that's for sure. But I know that it's not a great thing when water begins to come into your boat. I know you're probably thinking, "Great, thanks, Captain Obvious. Really appreciate that." But when water begins to come into your boat, even the most calm fisherman begins to think this is not a good situation. If we don't get this under control quickly, we are going to be in big trouble. And so as I'm thinking about this, and as I read that passage of scripture, it astounds me right there. And it's almost as if, and I picture this in my mind, maybe you don't think of things like this, but I picture right in the middle of the disciples being afraid in the midst of that moment, breaking news. What's Jesus up to? And you kind of pan to find out where Jesus is. If they had cameras back then, and they would pan over to find out where Jesus was. And there's Jesus. He's sleeping. Verse 38, the first part says this. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. And listen, we all have friends who just seem to sleep their life away. They can sleep through anything. You know, you hear about a bad storm at night. You say, did that wake you up? And they're like, "No, I had no idea. What's going on?" You could be going somewhere with them. You could be on a plane and they're out before, everybody even buckles up. They're sleeping and they sleep the whole way. It's amazing. People can sleep through a lot of different things. But the reality is, even them, in a moment like this, they would have woke up because this storm was a fierce storm. You got to note the words there. It was a fierce storm. And the wind and the waves began to come into the boat. And it was a very fierce storm. So everyone, whoever they were, they would be awake at this time, but not Jesus. He was sleeping. So picture this. There's Jesus taking a little siesta while all hell is breaking loose on the boat. And the disciples at this point, they're beginning to get really scared. And I don't want you to criticize them, because it would be easy to say, "Oh man, they should have had a lot more faith than that." You got to remember, I said a few moments ago, they were experienced professionals. This was not a usual storm. This was an unusual situation. So they were very afraid in that moment. They were panicking in this moment because the storm was about to destroy them. They thought, "We are going to die on this boat. We are going to drown. This storm is going to overtake us, and that is going to be the end of us. The second part of verse 38 is important here. The disciples woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown? Don't you care that we're going to drown?" Well, let's just stop there for a moment. Have you ever thought that Jesus was asleep when you were going through a storm? Have you ever thought for a moment that maybe you were experiencing some difficulties in life and you thought that maybe Jesus was asleep? You're thinking, where are you, Jesus? Maybe you thought, does he even care what I'm going through? Does it matter to him what I'm walking through at this moment, at this time in my life? Does it matter to him at all that I'm experiencing this pain and this agony at this point in time in my life? Does it matter that this storm is about to overtake me and I don't know what I'm going to do? Does he even care? Is he asleep? I think it's okay when we think that at times. Listen, it's okay to even admit that because, in fact, he already knows what you're thinking anyways. You might think you're hiding it, but he is already aware of how you feel in that moment. I want us to go back to the story and continue to read in verse 39. When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and he said to the waves, "Silence, be still." Or in some versions, as I mentioned before, "Quiet, be still." Suddenly the wind stopped and there was great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And I'm thinking, well, you're probably thinking, easy for you to say, Jesus, you were the one chilling out when we were about to die. But I don't know if many people notice this, and it hit me so clearly as I was looking at this passage. It's strange to me that they were terrified. It actually seems they were more terrified afterwards. They were afraid of dying in the storm. Yes, I get that. But they seem to be even more terrified afterwards as we read. They were more terrified that when Jesus got up and he spoke, they were terrified of what happened when the wind and the waves stopped. So literally in the original language, it means they feared a great fear. It says they were terrified, as we read a few moments ago, later on in verse 41. But it literally means they feared a great fear. It was a big fear for them. They seemed to fear death less at that moment than they feared the nearness or the supernatural presence of the Lord. Now let me ask you this question. Do you find the nearness or the presence of God unsettling sometimes in your life? Now, maybe you didn't think we were going to go there, but I think it's kind of important for us to address this. Sometimes the closeness of God in our lives, and yes, I think there's a desire created in all of us, a God-sized void. We want him, we long for him. But there's this fear if we get too close to God or he gets too close to us. If there's just too much closeness, so we long for it, and yet there's this fear that gets in there. And because of this fear that gets in there, we struggle. We struggle so much and we find ourselves and we say, well, if I just busy myself doing good things, then I'm going to be okay and I don't have to think about this. And we just think, well, if I do all these good things, I'm busy. Or if I've got this white noise going on. Maybe you've got worship music plastering all the time in your house, or maybe the television's on, or you've always got something on your device and you never have time to stop and think. You never have time to experience the closeness of God because your life is running at an incredible pace. Here we find ourselves in a season of life where we don't have any choice. A lot of the things that we busied ourselves with have been taken away. We can no longer do these things. Do you still find God's presence unsettling at times? And maybe you're thinking when you hear this, no, that's not how I love God's presence. I want more of his presence. Maybe others are thinking, I don't really know what that looks like. Maybe you've never really stopped and slowed down. As I look back and I think about this, I think we're terrified of experiencing too much of God because we're afraid it's going to change everything. You see, there's things in our lives that we like. There's things that we don't want to give up. We're creatures of habit. We're people who just love things done a certain way, our way. And we're afraid if Jesus gets involved in our lives, it's going to change everything. And I'm going to tell you, it will change everything, but it will change everything for the better. It seems to me, getting back to the miracle, that the point of this miracle is not so much just talking about the miracle so we can hear it said, oh, wow, what a great miracle. That was absolutely astounding. And let me be clear, it absolutely was astounding. But I think one of the points of this miracle, as we read it in the Gospel of Mark, is to point us to the saving power of God, to remind us who the Lord of the storm is, to remind us who is with us in the middle of the storm. Faith is more than just saying, I believe. Faith is putting your full weight or your full trust into the person of Jesus Christ. So what does this mean? How does this connect to us here today? How does this connect to us here today? How does it connect with our present storm here today? What do we do with this information today? Well, I think we're facing a storm that many of us have never seen. It's not a usual storm, just like the storm we read in Mark chapter 4. It's not a normal type storm. It's a very difficult storm. And I think one of the ways that it kind of connects to us is that it's really easy to us. If we go back to what I said at the beginning, I love to watch storms. It's easy for us to watch storms. It's easy for us to watch the storms that other people are going through and maybe even have some of the right answers to tell them, and we could have some great advice for them. But it's another thing to be walking in the middle of a storm. When we're watching a storm from relative safety, it's one thing. When we're in the middle of it, it's another. And all of us have been thrust into a storm that is spreading all over our planet right now for a variety of different ways. It affects everyone differently, but the truth is it's really affecting everyone in some way, shape, or form. What do we do when we're right in the middle of it? What do we do when we're in the thick of things? I want us to consider this. The disciples spent a lot of time with Jesus. They spent time with Jesus and they were in the middle of a storm, and for some strange reason they still didn't think that Jesus was a viable option. They just cried out and said, we're going to drown, but they really didn't know what was going to happen. There was so much fear. And Jesus was sleeping. He was chilling out, taking a nap while they were going through this. But he was still right there with them. I know sometimes in our lives today, people say, just pray. And we think of that word just pray as a last resort, and really it should be our first step. We think of praying, and we think maybe as you're watching this today, you're thinking, oh, praying? Come on. Seriously, Mark, what are you talking about? Prayer? I tried that before. I tried that in one of the most difficult moments of my life, and I cried out to God, and I prayed, and God didn't answer my prayer. He didn't answer the prayer the way that I needed him to answer my prayer. Maybe you lost a loved one. Maybe you experienced a hardship. Maybe you went through bankruptcy. Maybe things didn't go your way and you were devastated by all of those things. And you began to think, I can't believe God would allow me to go through that. Maybe you're thinking he's asleep in the middle of your storm, so why bother praying? The problem with that is twofold. Number one, we begin to blame God and we think it's his fault that he didn't do things the way that we think he should do things. Number two, we think it's our fault. We think that if we had been more spiritual, or if God loved us enough, or if we prayed the right kind of prayer, had just enough faith, then he would answer the prayer. And both of those things are really dangerous. And I want to encourage you today. It's not about us having the right level or amount of faith as it relates to that. It's about who our faith is in. It's about who is Lord of the storm that you are facing in your life right here, right now. I think one of the most challenging things is that all of us at one time or another in our lives have underestimated the power of God. We've underestimated the power of God to look after our lives when we're in the midst of a deep crisis. The result of us underestimating the power of God to work in our lives has been fear and panic and worry, because we are afraid that we lost control, when the truth is we really didn't have control anyways. Once again, I want to say it this way. You might feel like Jesus is sleeping when you are going through one of the most difficult times in your life. When you need him the most, you might feel like, Lord, where are you? You might think he is sleeping like he was on the boat that day with the disciples. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. You say, well, how do you know that it's the furthest thing from the truth? Well, just last week we celebrated Easter, and we celebrated and remembered the death and then the resurrection of Jesus. Jesus endured the pain of the cross for you and for me. If he didn't bail, if he didn't abandon ship in that moment, why would he do it today? He is with you today as you walk through it. I get it. You may not always feel like Jesus is right there with you. You might not always feel like he is right there with you in your most troublesome times. When you have big decisions or you've got massive problems, you might feel like you're all alone. But just because you feel like you're all alone, it does not mean that you're all alone. Just because Jesus was sleeping on the boat that day, it doesn't mean he wasn't there with the disciples. We see that when he got up, he literally spoke. And when Jesus spoke, quiet, be still, the wind and the waves settled. There was an incredible calm and an incredible peace in those moments. I want you to know that Jesus is not ignorant to what you're going through today, meaning he understands what you're going through today. I want you to know that he's not up there thinking, oh man, I can't believe they're bothering me right now. He's not indifferent either to your situation. Well, we'll see how this one turns out. Didn't really see that COVID-19 thing coming. That one threw me for a loop. That's the furthest thing from the truth. You see, today, if you're not listening to anything else, I hope that you will understand this. He is the Lord of the storm. And his simple words can speak peace into existence. Quiet, be still, and the storm that is raging around you can stop. And maybe when he speaks those words into your life, or maybe you need him to speak those words into your life right now, quiet, be still. And your heart needs to be still. Maybe the storm will rage on around you, but it's your heart that needs to be settled in these moments. Maybe it's your mind that is racing and you can't even quiet your mind down, and it needs to stop, it needs to settle. And I believe Jesus wants to speak to your mind and your heart today. Quiet or silent, be still. Unbelief can paralyze us at one point in time in all of our lives. It will paralyze us. It will hold us back. But I want to remind you once again today, there is one who can calm the storm in your life. There is one who is Lord of the storm, and his name is Jesus. As we wrap up this morning, I just have a few questions that I want to encourage you to respond to. I want to encourage you to respond or journal them over the course of the week. You can just turn this off today and that could be it, but that would be, I don't think, enough. I think it's good for us to reflect on these things. So I have a couple of questions for you here today. Is there something in your life? Is there a storm in your life that you need to invite Jesus to speak to? Do you need to hear the words quiet, be still in some area of your life today? If that's so, maybe take some time to write about that and what you need today. Have you been facing an overwhelming storm? Do you feel right now at this moment in time like you are drowning? If that's you, if you think you're going to be overwhelmed and you don't know what to do, this is your moment to cry out to Jesus. This is your moment to cry out to him honestly. Say, Jesus, help me, save me now. I need your help. Have you been panicking? Have you been accusing Jesus of not caring about what you're walking through right now? Once again, that's the furthest thing from the truth. One last question I have here today, and I really want to challenge you to write this down. And I want to take it right from the words that we read from Jesus in verse 40. And they said this, then he asked them, after he calmed the storm, why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? Here's the last question. I want you to write this down. Maybe write out what you might be afraid of. And it's simply this, what are you afraid of? Why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? And I know that might seem counterintuitive. If I write it down, it might become real then. Listen, if you write it down, then you can literally give it to Jesus. If you write those things down, you begin to say, Jesus, please speak to these storms in my life. Please speak to these fears. Please speak to these worries. Please speak to these moments when I feel overwhelmed and like I'm not going to make it through. I want to challenge you today that Jesus is with you. He is the Lord of the storm. You are not alone. You might feel like you're alone, but you are not alone in these moments. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we come before you today. God, I'm so grateful for your hand on all of our lives. Lord, for all those who are watching, I pray, God, Lord, even those who might not feel like you're with them in these moments, I pray that they would realize that you are Lord of the storm, that you are with them in the middle of the storm. Lord, I pray you'd speak to the areas of all of our lives that we need to give to you, the storms, the moments when we feel like you're sleeping, the moments when we feel like you're not around or you don't care. God, forgive us for that. But Lord, as we speak those to you honestly today, I pray we'd lay them at your feet. I pray, God, that you would change things around, give us a different perspective. Lord, I pray that we would be people who would invite your incredible presence into our lives each and every day. I pray this all in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. Just one final word. If you're here today and you'd like prayer, I want to encourage you to go to our website, www.cornerstone.ca. cornerstonecambridge.ca and click on the prayer tab. We would love to pray for you. If you need anything, we encourage you to send us an email as well, info@cornerstonecambridge.ca. May God bless.
Thanks so much for watching the Cornerstone Community Church YouTube channel. Please click subscribe to be sure that you don't miss any new content. And if you'd like, share it with a friend. If you want to support our ministry, please click the link in the description below. Thanks so much for checking us out.